all change processes, and specifically the climate transformation, are just driven by people. And we just need to know which kind of challenges we have along the way. We really want to make sure no one feels like he or she is the only one having all these problems or opportunities to change. And we really want to connect in the webinars with the climate community and show best practices, how to overcome those challenges and how to learn from others. And yeah, how to take step by step a next step in this net zero transition, and specifically also looking into scope 3 and the supply chain. And having said that, I am super honored to invite you to our 5th Climate Transformation Summit, which is also totally in that vision and mission of us to connect really the climate community, people who are actively working in companies to drive that change forward. So supply chain leaders, sustainability leaders, any kind of decision makers. And we're going to meet for the first time in person, this time on the 12th of September in Impact Hub Berlin. We have a really cool location there at a place that's totally rooted in sustainability and impact itself. And we will have a limited ticket of 100 people to really work a full day together. So it's not a typical conference, but really driven by networking, by workshops, by meeting others, speed networking. So you can apply actually now for being part of it under climatesummit.de, or you're very quick and take your mobile out and scan what I have put here as a QR code. So yeah, if you want to dive deeper, that's your opportunity. But that leads me already to today's session with my experts. And before I might check if I can, and I think I can, learn a little bit about you before we start into the panel discussion. So you have the opportunity always in our webinars to be part of it. And first question here is, where do you actually stand when looking at LkSG and CSDDD? Was your company affected by it? Or was it not affected? Both opportunities there. Or are you done with LkSG and now dive deeper into CSDDD? Or you are just preparing and looking a little bit to learn more. So there are lots of choices. And that's the first thing to see where you stand right now and what maybe is the starting point for you to start today. And I see a lot of answers are coming in. Some might need to read the long text still to find their answer. I give you a little bit more time, and now I stop the survey, and you should see now the result. So it's very diverse. I have to see which one is the biggest share. So 25% of you say we have already been affected by LkSG and are now preparing for CSDDD. And yeah, then we have all the other things as well. And we have 21%, so almost the same, that say they were not subject to the obligations of both supply chain laws, but they're actively informing themselves. So we have, I would say, a nice spread from all kind of setups. And then I try to find the second question and share it. And this is, in which role are you actually working on this topic, even though you might be just interested and not directly affected? Is it that you are part of the procurement team, that you are part of the sustainability team, that you are just in general in the C-level somewhere working on strategy, or you're part of compliance, you are part of data and processing of specifically supplier relationships, or you work on quality and control, or other. So we try to be very creative. Not sure if marketing HR would have fitted here. So very specific job titles here. And there are already some that said others, so we missed something. But you have a small moment. And now I'm going to stop it. And this time, the answer is much more clear, I would say. So 53% are from the sustainability team and 20 from the procurement team. So really seems to be led by sustainability teams. Great. You might have to click away the survey to not longer see it. That's always for me the case. I hope I did it right and you're not longer seeing it for you. Which leads me to the three experts to welcome them on stage. So I will not do a long introduction. I just hope everyone arrives here in the panel. So Yasha is the first one to show up, and Tabea and Max, great. Thanks for being here today. I would say maybe a quick round. Tabea, from where are you joining in today here? Good to have you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Hello from Berlin.
Great. So one person still there. And Max, I think you are near to my place where I'm in Düsseldorf right now.
Yeah, hello. I am in between Bonn and Cologne. Good afternoon.
Great. And Yasha, from
Yes,
where do you join?
Yeah, also Berlin. So hi everyone, and looking forward to the discussion today.
Great. Then maybe for the audience also to explain you the setup for the next, maybe 20 minutes. We're going to go into a small round of introductions from each of my three experts here and to share their practical knowledge or working knowledge with that topic. So we have an introduction. You can always use the Q&A function, which already Andrea did amazing. So you can always put in here, if you have any questions, comments, I will collect them. We have a mirror board where I just will shortly put now the link in the chat. You can see it hopefully when you click into it. So I will collect all the questions, and then after the three gave their introductions, we will go to the mirror board. If you don't make it there, it doesn't matter. We're going to share the screen and then have all the discussions based on your questions, actually, to make sure we answer everything. Having said that, I had a long part of talking. I would hand over to Yasha first.
Perfect. Just one comment in case you cannot find the Miro board link. It's also in the Q&A in the answered questions area. So you can check that out already and maybe have access. And with that, I'm gonna start to this webinar with a quick and a brief input from my end. Start with a quick overview on kind of like, okay, what are we talking about? So this webinar specifically, okay, what can we learn for the CSDDD by the experience that we were able to gain in Germany around the Supply Chain Due Diligence Act. Then, as Lara mentioned, Tabea will go into strategic learnings, change culture, and overcoming roadblocks from her experience in practically implementing the LkSG. Then Max will speak about success factors for implementation from their learnings from various projects. And then we, as mentioned, will have an interactive discussion and really looking forward to this because we've already seen a lot of you are experts and working on these topics and made different experiences. So I am really looking forward to hear what your thoughts, what are your challenges currently, and go deeper into this. So starting with a quick overview of what are actually the differences that are coming towards us in Germany about supply chain due diligence that got introduced with the adoption of the CSDDD, which got passed on the 24th of April this year. And I tried to kind of like summarize it a bit and make it as simple as possible. But I think like the key four areas that we see is, of course, the scope of affected companies is different. the affected suppliers or supply chain part is different. There's different sanctions and fines involved for non-compliance, and then also the topics, what actually needs to be protected, also changed, and with the introduction, or will change with the CSDDD regulation. And to go deeper into this, to give you an overview, so in general, the CSDDD affects more companies. However, it affects less companies in Germany, since the LkSG, or the German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, affected around 4,800 companies in Germany, and was defined as starting with 1,000 employees to be obliged to report on supply chain due diligence. The CSDDD now made this a little bit broader, so also companies that have at least 450 million in turnover need to report, and that sums up all the European companies that will be affected to approximately 5,300 companies in the European Union. And of course, like with the Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, also the CSDDD has a phased introduction, so not everyone is affected right away, but will be affected over the course of the next years. Then who's actually affected, or which parts of the supply chain are affected? I think the main difference is of course that now the full supply chain, so upstream and downstream parts of the supply chain, are affected. Whereas before there was only direct relationships affected, or suppliers in tier N, if there was substantiated knowledge to act, actually. And the CSDDD really expands this now and basically says, okay, every activity that is relevant for the producing or chain of production of your goods, including also storage, transportation, and the sales or distribution, actually, if they're carried out on behalf of the companies, this is also affected. However, they're only affected if there is risk identified. So suppliers can actually be excluded on the basis of a risk-based approach. And the risk-based approach, or the risk analysis, is identical with the supply chain processes, or supply chain due diligence risk analysis of the German law. The third area, the sanctions and fines, really mean that there's like a much higher increased risk for non-compliance. So where the supply chain due diligence directive in Germany didn't have any civil liability, and also kept fines to 2% of average yearly revenue, it will increase with the CSDDD, because there will be civil liability for damages within a span of 5 years. Also, not only people or countries or whoever is affected can file complaints, but also NGOs can file complaints on behalf of victims. And there's a lot more possibility of, or there's also then the possibility of naming and shaming publicly, which means really an increased risk of also all the financial ratings, and also the effects that it can have on your company's public relations and public standing. Then the fourth part, and that is of course for us at the Climate Choice, the most important part, is that the CSDDD makes climate reporting mandatory for the companies. So the German supply chain due diligence law focused on human rights and environmental protection aspects. And first of all, those aspects got expanded by various topics, such as biological diversity or protection of the ozone layer. But very specifically, companies now also have to adopt and annually update a climate transition plan. So it's not specifically part of the protected goods, but it's part of that the companies need to actually plan to transition into a low carbon economy. And that, of course, also addresses the value chain with the same topics in comparison to the other topics. So it basically means a climate transition plan. Just to give you a very brief overview, means basically a description of how your company plans to transition in a low carbon economy. And that covers also supply chain emissions, so all Scope 3 emissions, upstream and downstream, as well as the targets setting for emission reductions, the risks associated with climate impacts on your company, also concrete plans on how to reach those targets in your value chain as well, not only in your own company, but in your value chain. And with that, I want to hand over to Tabea to look at her experience on implementing the German LkSG and the learnings at Atruvia.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, for the nice overview. There were also some questions already in the chat. So first of all, congrats. That's exactly right. So please always put them there. I already put a note also on the Miro board, so I'm moderating those. And yes, also we're going to share later the insights. We are recording the webinar, so you also will get that at a later point. Yeah, handing over to Tabea, you should be able to share your screen. You have the right to that, I hope.
Yes, I think yep, there we go.
Perfect. So yeah, Jascha gave the difference between the German and the European supply chain law, and you have been working in the last months very heavily on the German side. So good to hear your insights.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly. Yeah. Hi again, everyone. My name is Tabea. I'm a manager in CSR and sustainable procurement. I work for Atruvia. Just to give you a very, very brief kind of context of where I operate in. Basically, it's IT for finance. So we are the digitizers of the co-op banks in Germany. So anything that's Volksbank, Raiffeisenbank, Union Investment, etc. The German-speaking folks will know what I'm talking about, I think. And we basically do everything that's IT for our banks. So from hosting all the banking apps in our own data centers to IT support to all that's like AI and stuff, that's all running through us. Just to give you a very brief context. And yes, so I'm in procurement at Atruvia. I've been with the company for a little over 2 years ago, which is also when the sustainability journey especially in procurement, kind of really kicked off. Of course, as many other companies, let's say, encouraged by the German regulations, by the LkSG. And yeah, we have, I think, very successfully implemented a pretty good sustainable procurement strategy. And I thought I'd share a few learnings and a few of the roadblocks that we have faced, and that we kind of use now as a jumping off point for the European regulations. So the CSDDD, of course, being the focus today, but also the CSRD in the future, which we are preparing for right now. So the three big learnings I want to kind of share before we jump into my slides are basically that we realized that we really have to utilize all of our different dimensions. I'm going to show you in a second, and really kind of make sure all dimensions work together and communicate. And communication is really going to be like the thread running through my presentation you're going to see. The second is that gathering data alone is not going to help you. You really have to use that data. You have to know which data you're gathering and why you're doing that. Because what we realized with ourselves as well, and when I'm at conferences, I hear that from other people too, is that you kind of like to believe the lie that as long as you have enough tools and enough data you're buying, you're going to be fine. But in the end, it's not going to do the job for you. You're going to have to use that data. And lastly, and I'm going to come back to the beginning here, communication really is the one big thing that needs to be done here, both within your company, but also with other people working in similar fields, which is why it's so great that we're here today, sharing experiences, and also within your bigger company structure. Yes, but coming back to my, oh, if it's working, no, there we are. Beginning what I said about dimensions. So what we realized when as I just said, we started a bit over 2 years ago with sustainable procurement specifically, is that we realized, okay, we're not really starting from zero, which is what it feels like sometimes. We have a lot of stuff already, especially with us being kind of in a bigger group structure, as I said, with the second largest bank in Germany. And then also, of course, with our own subsidiaries, etc. We have a lot of strategies. Of course, we have a lot of policies that we fall into. We're in finance, so we're very, very tightly regulated here. And of course, we have like different sub-strategies and just even down to teams and to kind of task forces having different agendas. So the first thing we did is we checked our framework, of course. So we made sure we really knew what was kind of required from us on a macro level, so on a policy level, especially for procurement here. We then tried to kind of put that next to what we already had formalized, I'd say, in different strategies at the meso level, meaning corporate strategy, divisional strategies, and also customer strategy. Because seeing as we're, again, like in the finance sector, our customer strategy, quite important here. And we try to understand, do a gap analysis, essentially, and try to understand really which quantitative goals and kind of KPIs are in these strategies, which qualitative goals, and what's kind of more of like a vague vision, let's say. And we try to really just rudimentary almost kind of write it down in an Excel sheet, put it next to procurement strategy, commodity group strategies, and sustainability strategy, as you see here in the big part in the middle, and see if those goals even align. And it sounds very simple, but what we realized talking to our colleagues is that sometimes there's KPIs and there's goals, etc., which are great. However, in the sub-strategies, there's nothing to kind of support that goal or support that KPI, just because communication doesn't really work like that. So what we did then was to kind of, from procurement, it was really like a bottom-up approach, kind of really try and reach as much transparency as we could 2 years ago, which wasn't ideal yet, I can tell you that already. And really kind of communicate to our C-level management and even up all the way to our banks what we can be transparent about, what we already have in data, and what is just simply not possible yet. So that then came down to us really having like a good overview of what can we manage, what can we not manage, where do we actually need data, where do we have data that's just not structured yet, that we can't use yet in a proper way. And then we came to point number 3 here, which is really deriving and aligning working steps. So for all of our colleagues that are not super familiar with like the bigger picture in sustainability, in procurement, in scope 3, etc., and kind of make it manageable for them, because that's also something we realize that often we have good strategies, we have great tools, we have a good roadmap, but if the people who are actually day-to-day supposed to be doing these things and help us achieve our goals, if they don't know what they're doing and why they're doing that and kind of what it's all leading up to, it often gets forgotten about, it gets deprioritized because they're busy people. And if we really kind of take them along from the beginning and make sure we communicate well what those working steps are, what they lead to, and what the big end goal is, it's much easier to get people on board, which I think is the big thing in sustainability. Yeah, I try to kind of simplify it in a way, even though there's a lot of colors and text fields on this slide. But what it comes down to for us is using our data rather than just gathering data to actually create transparency, or structure through systems is what I call it here. And trust me, I've been there, just hoping and praying that all these like very lofty kind of promises of, oh, buy this tool and then it's just gonna take care of itself, etc. I get it, but essentially it's not going to do us any good if we buy tools or data before we know what we need, and also if we then don't use it to its full potential. But what we kind of achieved now with the very like tight tool structure that we have, especially for sustainable procurement and for our supply chain management, is that we kind of used all the data that we have on the left here, like all the different data points we had already and that we were using or maybe not using, or like risk management processes from our governance department that are already in place that we can use, but we're not yet, and kind of filter that through all kinds of different tools and kind of platforms that we have to actually get to qualitative and quantitative risk assessment, to get transparent supply chains in terms of ethics, in terms of human rights, in terms of ecological factors, obviously, in terms of scope 3, now leading up to CSDDD, etc. And also kind of set up commodity group strategies, which you saw on the first slide as well, to really give for like sub-commodity groups even our procurement team the tools that they need and the understanding that they need based on the tools that they can use already to really forward sustainability here. Yes, and that's so I'm not going to talk too much. My final slide already. The challenges we're using now as launchpads, of course, at the top for me, always communication. This is always my kind of mantra wherever I go. I say, communicate with people, take your people along, make it as obvious, as transparent as you possibly can, because for sustainability especially, you can't do it alone. And I know it's like a constant uphill battle, it feels like sometimes, to get people on board. And I know I had a discussion a few weeks ago with a corporate strategy, and I said, well, it's kind of tough to make sustainability like a yearly goal because we can't really track it the same. We're doing financial things throughout the year. And I said, what do you mean? Like that's not really an argument for me. This can't possibly be the yardstick we're using to set goals here. So kind of really making sure that you pick everyone up on where they stand and kind of make it transparent to them why things matter and why we do things how we do them. Of course, it only works with a shared base knowledge. As I just tried to explain, to kind of make clear what the different strategies are, what the KPIs are, because again, not everyone knows every strategy. Also explain which tools we need, which data points we need and why it's important, and also kind of to take responsibility, especially in procurement. When it comes to sustainability, we have the biggest lever by far within the company structure, and to really communicate that and make sure that the procurement team is visible when it comes to sustainability. Then almost at the end here, not waiting for perfect processes. This for me is a big one, and I know my process colleagues never love to hear this, but you can't always wait to find the perfect solution within your procurement processes or also within your risk management processes. Sometimes you need to bridge the gap between starting and having like the perfect finished automated process for risk assessment, sustainability assessment, etc., and really kind of being pragmatic in a way. Really, pragmatism is a big theme here. And finally, creating transparency and visibility of sustainability strategies and the needs for the execution. So as my final point here, really trying to create transparency through the data you have, through the tools you have, and make sustainability, but also procurement generally more visible, and really bring the point across why it's so important, what you need to succeed, because I think that's often just not really understood. So people kind of shoo it away. So you can really execute your strategies and kind of make sure that you become a motor really for sustainability within your own context. Yes, and now I'm almost... Thank you.
Thanks, Tabea. Really, really good insights. Maybe for everyone who's wondering why I always look right, I have a second screen and I keep collecting already so many insights that I put on the Miro board. So yeah, we got to have them there. Plus we already had, as said, like some questions that I put down there. So you just know, and I'm happy to take more questions on the board that come in when you, Max, share how you have been helping or what you learned also around the processes.
Sure, thank you. I will share my screen here in a moment. Jascha already said it. My name is Max. I work for AMC Group. We help companies and procurement functions navigate through sustainability. And I think looking back at what Tabea just said, I think there's a couple of things that I can build onto. You mentioned that there is a difference between gathering data and using data, and it needs to be bridged, and that gathering data by itself is not helping, and that using data is one of the key facts. I couldn't agree more. And especially, or where I maybe disagree to a certain extent, is what you talked about processes. I agree that you don't have to be perfect at the beginning, and it's all about starting and being pragmatic. What I do think, though, is that processes are this bridge that we're looking for between gathering data and using data. And especially when you're talking about scaling up sustainability initiatives and making sure that you can implement them across different branches, sectors, countries, because processes at the end describe what needs to be done, how it's done, and who does it. So that's why I think and try to make the case here today for processes, and looking at what Jascha mentioned before from a legal perspective and what Tabea is talking about in a company-specific perspective. I'm trying to give a brief overview of what we have learned working in different branches and different companies and can take out as a result. And I like to stress it because it comes handy within sustainability topics in general. I think due diligence, like we're talking here about the due diligence law or EU Forestation Act, etc., is not achieved by intentions or any other declarations of intent, so to speak, but have to be drilled down and actually documented in the processes. So I think process models create a foundation for such actions. The maturity kind of depends on where you stand by yourself and where you come from. What I mean with this, I'd like to share another quick graphic here on the next slide. When we talk about processes where you have the possibility to implement sustainability topics, you need to look at a certain maturity level. We like to assess projects and processes here with this model, which is not invented by us, but is used in IT quite often. And the main level for process maturity, I think, that needs to be reached in order to be able to work and add sustainability topics in processes is that you need to have a standardized process, right? So when we look at these maturity levels 1 and 2, where basically everybody does what they want or they follow their team lead, it's really hard to scale up sustainability activities and initiatives. And that's why, my point here for this discussion today is that we need a base of standardized processes when we talk about sustainability. Looking at the next slide that I have brought here is just a brief overview of different processes primarily happening in procurement. So we usually look at strategic, tactical, and operational processes, where tactical processes typically is your sourcing activity. Strategic processes, like Tabea just mentioned, category management, commodity group management, supplier management. And when we dive into the next level and we look at the pre-qualifications or the supplier registration or supplier evaluation, this is where the nitty-gritty really starts, right? And if you want to implement sustainability topics and due diligence activities like from the German due diligence law, then really the qualification, the registration process is part of this bigger picture, because that's where you can set up the rules of engagement, so to speak, right? You want to implement your code of conduct, you want to talk about what you expect from business partners entering into your supplier list. You can evaluate them across their performance, depending on whether you're looking at scope 3 and decarbonization measures, whether you're looking at social scores. So typical procurement processes, when you have them and they have a standardized level, can be really useful in scaling up sustainability issues. And with that being said, and looking at our time, I just want to share a couple of insights that we have come across here in the last 2 years from projects that we worked in implementing and helping companies implement LkSG due diligence aspects, and go a little bit broader. So when we take a look at company-wide success factors, I think obviously top management support and clear project responsibility is a big topic. I think we've seen a good old blame game here the last couple of years, whether it's handled by HR, whether it's handled by sustainability, procurement, legal teams. And the answer really is that you need to have a clear structure of who's responsible. Obviously, it's a project that involves many different departments. So it's not just procurement, it's also not just sustainability, but you need to have clear responsibilities. So that's what I meant with the second point here, awareness of a holistic implementation plan. Another insight that I found quite useful is that existing risk management policies, processes, and systems can be used, right? So the methodology of risk management is not new to most companies. It's just that within the sustainability law here, or the supply chain law, we're shifting the focus. Typical risk management is working to deviate risk from the company. Now we're looking at what risk comes from you and is going throughout the supply chain. So you can use the methodology, you can use processes that have been implemented, enterprise risk management, etc. You're just focusing switching the focus. So when it comes to implementation, that is something that we have learned has helped a lot of companies understand, saying that they don't have to reinvent the wheel, but actually build on some existing structures. Within procurement, one of the topics that always comes in handy, whether you're using software afterwards to gather this information or do it in Excel, master data quality and transparency are the most important issues, right? You need to understand what you are buying, where you are buying, in what countries, in what commodity groups. And I think it happens all the time that people and companies say, we have a good commodity group structure, but 50% of spend is in goods and services and a catch-all commodity group that takes the rest. So really cleaning up your data and understanding what the categories are that you're buying and where they're coming from really helps. Same goes for a robust process landscape. If you have something like that, if you have a good supplier management in place already, this is where you can add on these aspects that drive supply chain due diligence. I think Tabea already mentioned that digital infrastructure is really helpful, but not a savior, right? You need to understand what you are trying to do. You need to have a good goal, and then it's a tool. It's not a means to an end. So understanding what you're trying to achieve and understanding the goal is one of the biggest most important things when it comes to using software along this implementation process. Another insight I think that is interesting for maybe some of you here is what are the advantages for public sector companies. So we're not looking at publicly traded companies, but specifically here public sector companies. And from what I've seen here in our projects, I can at least say that the risk in their own potential business area is comparatively low. Because we do have quite a high legal standard in Germany, and most of the public sector companies are set up pretty well. Existing compliance and risk management systems provide very good foundation for fulfilling the due diligence obligations. So kind of checking again, what do you already have in place and how does this pay into these due diligence activities and what is asked from companies. Same in procurement. From the public sector companies, we've seen that they have a comparatively higher share of regional sourcing versus, for example, low-cost country sourcing, where there's an inherited risk. They do have primarily two sourcing channels. So we're looking at public tenders, and again, the threshold to take part in a public tender is quite high. The public companies have a lot of activities that need to be adhered to and policies that need to be adhered to in order to take part in these tenders. So I think the threshold is already high to be able to take part here. Same goes for everything that is awarded without a tender. I think there's often a very stringent qualification process. We have plenty of supplier approvals to reduce risk. So those are a couple of things that we've seen in difference to private companies. And just maybe to wrap it up and start with the discussion here, a couple of top measures that we've seen in procurement and that work pretty well. Everything that I've said so far about process-related activities, so understanding your supplier review and approval process, how to use strategic supply evaluation that most companies are also very familiar with, looking, for example, at the ISO 9001 qualification that requires a supplier evaluation. So that can be used as something to add on these criteria. Working with proper contractual assurances, so supplier code of conduct, even though it's not the main topic in procurement. I think it sets a good example and it sets a baseline of what you expect from business partners working on general terms and conditions, implementing framework agreements. And then the two things that are more specifically or specific, training of own employees, video on-site, on-demand, depending on the category and the risks that they are affected by. And when you look at control measures, I think there's obviously different types of audits, depending on how much time, resources, and you have available. Sometimes it could be as easy as a phone call and understanding what your suppliers are doing. Questionnaire. So these are just a couple of things that all work towards achieving compliance within regard of the German sustainability or German supply chain law. And they go also hand in hand, I think, with everything looking at the European directive that is coming or has been voted now. I think that's it. And hopefully we've got plenty of questions. I already made a couple of comments here on what we talked or what I saw in the questions. And yeah, handing back to Lara and Jascha.
Great. Yeah, thanks a lot for again the so many insights. So I hope you can actually see now my screen. Maybe you let me know. Do you see the mirror board now?
No, I still see Max's screen.
Yeah, then maybe Max needs to stop.
I stop. Now I stopped.
Here we go. Yeah, now we see the mirror board.
Mirror board. Perfect. Okay, cool. Some of you already made it on that board. You find the link in the Q&A. But yeah, as said, do not worry if you don't make it. You should see it over my screen. Any question you put already in the chat is on there, which you can still do. You also have the possibility to actually raise your hand. So there is a function next to the Q&A which gives a hand symbol. If you click on it, we get a sound and we can actually make you also come speak and share your question or comment. What I quickly want to summarize is, okay, we started the discussion with there is the upcoming European supply chain law, which was kind of introduced as the acting model for CSRD. So it is connected to it. It relies to that. It also takes the requirements in from the climate transition plan. We had a small overview from Jascha. He had a different graphic. I tried to summarize it here with another one we have to show like, okay, there are climate implications coming. I have to align my own business and supply chain with a 1.5-degree target. But then there are also different impacts that affect like depending on the size of the company, that you also have to integrate your whole supply chain, but then also that there are certain liabilities, which was one of the questions already. And then I think I have to go a little bit more in so you can potentially read what's already on the board. We had certain questions that we can dive into, and I'm going to use the panelists to answer those. But then, we had already insights and best practices that I tried to cluster. So as said, one insight was we have to look into climate now in the supply chain. That was from Jascha. We had from Tabea that sustainability KPIs and tracking them is now becoming as important as financial data. You cannot just say, we cannot do that every year, so we just stop it. That's exactly the purpose of the whole reporting now, that you have to do it on a yearly basis. And then also from Max that supply chain due diligence, even though you will not start with a perfect process, needs a process, and that is maybe the goal you want to work towards, from starting without perfection with some data to coming towards a system you can rely on and work every year with to bring sustainability into your procurement topics. And best practice where also here I might just show them quickly. So data is not solving everything, it's just a starting point. You might need qualitative and quantitative data, but then it's really about the people. So it's specifically bringing sustainability and procurement team together, which I think is already insightful, because we saw here 50% are from the sustainability teams and then 20 from the procurement teams. So that might be part of the problem visible already here in the webinar. Really procurement is right now the ones working with that, specifically looking into the supply chain. But then, yeah, there's training maybe missing, but also internal transparency and communication, which Tabea highlighted. And yeah, again, you might need in these processes different steps. So that's also something that was highlighted, like supplier scoring can be one part of it, review processes. You also said selection, and maybe when you go into a refinement of contracts or code of conducts, those can be documents where you define the next levels you want to have. But then there are many questions, and I might just pick one, but also Jascha, Tabea, Max, feel free to add maybe things you want to have, or also pick one of the questions you feel were not good enough highlighted for me. I think the biggest discussion here, even though we don't have a lawyer here in the expert team, is what is about the liability of CSDDD is now my personal life at risk. Maybe Tabea, how do you see that? How are you dealing with this part that CSDDD will have also potential consequences?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, not quite. We're not gonna go to jail individually now. Also, just an FYI, because it's related. There's just one more question in the Q&A about reporting. Maybe we can put it there as well, because I think that's a point for
I just copy it.
Yeah, so the civil liability thing, it's similar to CSRD, in case that's maybe something you're more familiar with, I believe. Again, Jascha and Max, please interrupt me if that's wrong. Basically just means for CSDDD that management specifically has legal obligations, of course, and individual parties can now kind of sue if they are personally wronged, let's say, by companies, etc. So that's that works a bit dissimilar to the current regulations. However, with the European policies, they're not finalized yet in their national versions. So we have the international, like multinational, let's say, regulations. The translation into German law, for example, isn't finalized yet. So that's going to get a bit more clear in the future. But yeah, so the civil liability thing is more that there could be civil lawsuits against management of certain companies. And yeah, so the liability is a lot more stern, let's say, than it has been for sustainability policies so far with the European ones, yeah.
Max, Jascha, something you want to add? Yeah.
I guess I could add, I think there was a question before, what kind of topics we are looking at and what kind of fines could be expected. And I think looking at the German law, I think especially in the short term, we are more looking at fines rather than penalties, if that's the perfect explanation. So I think what we're going to be seeing is a fine for example, not handing in your report on time or not having a complaint mechanism in place. Those fines are probably or probable because it's actually clear that you have not fulfilled a certain obligation. What is going to be a lot more difficult and is going to maybe have to be shown in case law are certain violations against topics that haven't been really defined yet. So the German law, for example, talks about substantial knowledge within your supply chain. And if there's certain substantial knowledge, you have to act. So arguing that companies have had substantial knowledge while it's not really a defined term is going to be really difficult. So I think in the short term, we're going to be seeing fines, but not so much really penalties that exist or come out of cases.
That's probably super important also to highlight that just there is still the process going on to really be 100% sure. But probably the essence is, okay, there is something coming, and the regulation shows already that it is on a higher reliability level, so to say. I see more people coming to the board and taking actions. Also, something was deleted, but nothing bad. You cannot destroy it. We can bring everything bad. So it's good you bring your own questions in. You can also just move maybe here a thumbs up if you have just something you want to highlight again. Tabea, you made sure I don't overlook this question here. Like, is it allowed to combine CSRD reporting with CSDDD reporting, meaning to summarize in one report? Is that also a question you wanted to answer?
Sure. I mean, as much as I can at this point, because again, the final version of the European regulations into national regulations hasn't happened yet. So I think that's very important, especially when people try to scare you about this. It's very important to remember. With CSRD, it's gonna be a lot more soon, of course, but with CSDDD especially, because it's so fresh still, we really don't know yet what it's gonna look like finally, especially with reporting, because that then again takes a lot more time than the actual kind of guidelines of what to do. I mean, what's definitely going to happen, I think, is that CSDDD and the German supply chain due diligence law, so the LkSG, they're going to merge in some way. We're not going to keep reporting both. So, but that's going to happen with the translation into national law with different countries as well. As far as CSRD goes, because that is part of financial reporting, I'm not sure if that's going to also merge. So CSRD and CSDDD, let's say. So there, I would really be very careful to kind of definitely make a statement to that. I just wanted to kind of address it and to say it's not yet, we don't know yet, basically. The different governments don't know yet either. Finally, it could all still change. And yeah, so because it's still so fresh, that's not really like a definite answer yet to the processes.
I mean, there are discussions that you shouldn't have to do it double, so that it's very much aligned also. So when you're reporting to CSDDD, that you might not have to do the whole thing again, because basically CSDDD would then ask you to do the things from CSRD. So yeah, we will have to see how it exactly will be defined so that we don't have a double reporting happening. But I think that was a big part of the discussions also in the last weeks, like how to avoid that. But yeah, we're going to follow up closely to see. And I think it's very much when you look into CSRD reporting, we have already a lot of guidance for the CSDDD where you need to go more into. Looking to the time, there are some more questions left, so I have to be quicker. I think that was a good one. Who needs to be involved when going into all of this? And yeah, what needs to be looked at? Maybe who needs to be involved, I feel, is a really tricky question, because also Tabea talked about being very transparent and getting everyone important into the team. Maybe Max, who do you see normally needs to be there as a decision maker? And also you talked about risk taking and so on, or a risk road mapping that's maybe then more specific. And you also work with companies to probably, I think that's always a big question, to get the right budgets also for this change process. And
sure.
So it's not just a sustainability person.
I think number one, when we start with budget, the nice thing is that it's a law, right? So it's a compliance topic. It's not a nice to have, but a must have. So typically there's a case for providing budget. Now, how high it is a different question. What we've seen, I think, in the last 2 years is that cross-functional teams make sense, right? And to have even though it's called the Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, the highest call to action in this law is within your own company. So, and that's the highest responsibility. If you have issues in your own company, you have to make sure you correct them. If you have issues in your supply chain, you only have to correct them if you have the possibility, if you have real impact, etc. So it kind of depends on how the structure or the power is structured. When we start projects, we like to have everybody on board. So we're talking about HR, because the own company part is important. When you have a compliance department, it's really useful and helpful to have them on board as well, because they are familiar with the processes. For example, a complaint mechanism, or in Germany, Hinweisgeberschutzgesetz, which comes in handy. Procurement, obviously, because we're talking about a big fraction of suppliers that need to be looked at. Legal, I like to not have legal be the driver or the project manager, because they make it very legal, right? And to explain it, really, we are talking here about issues that are in the forming. I just mentioned, for example, this topic of substantial knowledge. And if you have lawyers that want to be really, really lawyerly in these topics, it might get really difficult. And sometimes I think it's good to come back to what Tabea just mentioned, be pragmatic and start. Let's not discuss about the 100th percentile and how we get everything perfect. Let's start. Sometimes it's 5 suppliers, sometimes it's 5 main topics. It's important to get started. And that's sometimes a little issue with legal. Who else are we looking at? Workers' representation, Betriebsrat, Personalrat in Germany always makes sense because they have a good insight on what they think is going on within the company. And then I think you have a good project team together. If you're looking at implementing software afterwards, make sure to have IT on board early enough to understand what their expectations are. And then I think having a good, and sustainability, obviously, right? You just mentioned that they have a big stake. Now we do have the situation that unfortunately, not all the companies are far enough to have sustainability teams. So that's not always the case. I think that's a good summary of what is useful.
Great. I see we are running towards the end. So maybe I just ask you all to have kind of a closing sentence for this one question. So what do I need to do? What is, so to say, the next step if I work now on supply chain due diligence? Maybe I do the round, starting with you, Jascha. What are like tips, best practices, where to start at?
Maybe also following on the question of like who needs to get involved. I think like with all the sustainability topics that we have, and specifically now with this climate transition plan, right, which should be part of the company's overall strategy. It's always important that the whole company is thinking about the issues, right? And as Max explained, that it also affects a lot of different departments. And I think like being pragmatical, starting to raise awareness, I guess, internally about the topic of what's needed, and also taking away the complexity and the scaredness, but really just start and working on addressing, taking first steps. I think that would be at least my takeaway, and handing over to Tabea, what she.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said most of it already. I think be pragmatic about it, really. Don't be scared. Make sure you know what you have to do, but also what you don't have to do. And then finally, just communicate, create transparency, and take responsibility, really. And then you're good to go.
Max, do you have a closing statement?
I would like to add that it's neither a marathon nor a sprint, but a journey. So
Nice.
Understanding that it's not a project that's going to end eventually. It's going to be, if you use it as a project character, you need to make sure that you hand it over into the organization, because sustainability is here to stay. It's a more of a mindset, and it's not really a project in this sense. So it's not going to stop.
Cool. That's a really nice sentence. I'm going to steal that on one side or the other. It's a journey. I mean, we always talk about climate transformation and the decarbonization journey, really, right? Because it also just goes with all your business partners and suppliers eventually. Thanks a lot for today's discussion and rather interactive panel. So we really wanted to have people here who work together with companies or in the company on exactly those topics, and maybe give them insight into like the reality also, I would say, how to work on those things. And if you have more questions, you can send them over. We're gonna also distribute them. You can still go to the Miro board. I saw around 20 people joining here, and we also gonna send you soon a recording and summary. So first of all, thanks a lot. Thanks for taking action and sharing your best practices and insights, and hope you have a wonderful afternoon. And here in Düsseldorf for now, it's sunny. So I wish you a sunny afternoon, everyone. Enjoy.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Everyone. Have a great week.